For a great cup of joe, there's one thing you should know. Your morning brew can also be playful. Buff Boy Brewing guys make the temperature rise, and you surely feel naughty when you swallow our coffee. If you want some real heat, give your mouth a fine treat. You will want some more, rest assured. Buff Boy Brewing, you can't get enough of.
It's time for The Scribble, your weekly fix of celebrity chats, bizarre stories in the news, and basic random chatter with best-selling author and syndicated radio host Jeremy Bradley. Make sure your seat is in the upright and locked position and your barf bag is securely in place. Here's Jeremy Bradley.
Thank you very much, Larson. Jeremy Bradley here. This is The Scribble. It's a career milestone for me today. I guess, is it a milestone if it's already over? It was 16 years ago, in just a couple days, 16 years ago that I started hosting my syndicated radio show, Top of the Charts. And in that was, first of all, it was life-changing, it was career-changing, it was just amazing. And I'm going to reflect on that, how the radio show started, kind of the ups and downs, just what I experienced over the years. And I'm going to play you some clips a little bit later on from some of the memories that I have that were just a little bit, in some cases, bizarre. So that's what we're talking about on the show today, 16 years of syndicated radio and some hilarious stories of my career. It's on The Scribble this week, and it starts right after this.
Who are the Kardashians feuding with now? What did that little thug Justin Bieber do this time? Who's getting hitched? And who's headed for Splitsville? Hear the latest celebrity news and gossip every day on Entertainment Wrap-Up. The good, the bad, the ugly, but mostly the ridiculously hilarious. It's all recapped in this daily segment at entertainmentwrapup.com. Have a laugh at the expense of the rich and famous when they take themselves way too seriously. It's 3 minutes of time-wasting fun at entertainmentwrapup.com. Check out Entertainment Wrap-Up at entertainmentwrapup.com. Brought to you by Speak Free Books.
Jeremy Bradley here, back on The Scribble. So, 16 years. Isn't that ridiculous? 16 years ago, I started on the radio. And let me give you the backstory about how this all happened, okay? Now, I've been a newspaper columnist for almost 19 years now at this point. And what I was doing was I had dropped out of school because I couldn't afford to pay for my final year. And so I had planned to work in the industry and get work, make money in the meantime, and then go back to school when I could afford it, right? I mean, that's the responsible thing to do. I was living with my parents, I was in the basement, and so my parents weren't paying for my school. As much as they were, this is what was weird though. Oh, wow, and my mom being a teacher at the time, of course, even more ironic. But, we'd hope that you'd go back to school. You should, well, if you're not going to help me, then shut up. Is kind of how, that was sort of the way I looked at it, right? And so I started writing newspaper columns, and then I was just, now you have to remember this is before the days of social media and, blogs even or anything. So I would, in the middle of the night, rather than going to bed, I would be going to different websites. So I would look up, I was in Canada, so British Columbia newspapers, British Columbia community newspapers. Basically what I was doing was I was compiling a list of every newspaper across Canada. And then what I started to do was every week I would just write a commentary, and then I would email it to about 600 newspapers every week. You might call that spamming nowadays. Although, come to think of it, I mean, it really wasn't. It was more so unsolicited content, because, spam is when I feel spam, if it's relevant, like I'm sending content to a newspaper in the hopes of it being published. So I don't know that it's considered spam. Do you know what I mean? Like, spamming is more, I have no interest in your company and somehow you got my email address and then you're just on a hope and same kind of a deal, but I'm pitching newspaper content to you. So that was the way I justified it, and okay. And so I would do that every week. I would email 600 and some newspapers across Canada with my commentary. Sometimes they would run them as a letter to the editor, and then when I would find out, I would go and say, you've got to pay me for my commentaries because they weren't being submitted as letters to the editor. So yes, I would be sending to the comments editor, to the main editor, to the publisher, to the owner, to whomever, at, like I said, almost literally every newspaper across the country. And one in my home province of Manitoba, the Southeast Journal, the owner initially actually tried to sell me the newspaper. So here we go, right? Here I am trying to just get to be paid to write this commentary. And the guy writes back and he's like, well, how about I sell you the newspaper and you run it? And I was like, I don't know how that's going to work. the reason I'm doing this is because I can't afford to go to school. I'm in no position to buy a newspaper, And so and then I actually talked with one of my friends who was a business person himself. And so I was like, could we actually do this? Like, it's really not that far from, where I lived in Winnipeg. And, and that friend turned into be a big flake. So we ended up not pursuing it. But basically, I ended up being a columnist in the newspaper and still am to this day, if you can believe that. Like I said, almost 19 years later. And what happened was there was internet radio just becoming popular, just becoming a thing back then. And there was an internet station in Vancouver that had, seen my columns, known about me, et cetera, and asked me to record my column. So basically the 300, 400 word column that I was writing every week, we basically want you to sit in front of a microphone and just read it. And I said no at first. And now this is where I was sort of like, wait a second, I've already done the work. It's not like I'm having to write anything different for these people. I just need to sit down and I'm gonna make more money off of what I've just written, right? I didn't have that business sense. I didn't. And so then I said, okay, well, here's the deal. I can do the work one time and cash in on it multiple ways. So what I did then was I wrote it for the newspaper, and then I made a website and posted it on the website, speakfreewithjb.com, which is still online now, I think almost 20 years later. And then I would voice it for the radio as well. So here I am writing one thing and marketing it 3 different ways and making money on it 3 different ways. Now, I also like to take credit for this. You're not going to believe me when I say this, but I believe I was one of the very first comment sections on a website, because newspapers weren't doing that at the time. Newspapers had that section for letters to the editor, and that was kind of really the only place where common folk would be able to have an opinion. News was just sort of straight, cut and dry, to the point, there you go. There wasn't that room for discussing it, commenting on it, whatever. It was just, these are the facts, this is what happened, move on. And, discuss at home, but certainly not publicly. So my Speak Free with JB website, basically, I had a comment form that you could fill out on every page and give me your opinion. And that's how I ended every column. That's my point. What's yours? And then, fill out the form below. And so what I would do was I would end up, at first, to kind of get the ball rolling, I would make up a bunch of replies and comments and post them as though people were participating. And then I would go into Yahoo chat rooms and AOL chat rooms, whatever was popular at the time. And I would say to people like, hey, look at this commentary. Like, can you believe what this guy says? And I would drive people to the website. Remember, like I said, keep in mind, this is before social media. This was not just a matter of, I can tweet it to 20,000 people with one click. No, that wasn't existent at the time, or that didn't exist at the time, excuse me. And so what happened was I teamed up with this radio station to be recording something every week for them, every Thursday. And then they said, do you want to co-host some shows with our team? And I said, well, I'm in Winnipeg, so I'll do it on the phone. Like, is that, you really want somebody on the phone the entire show? And they said, yeah, it'll be good. Don't worry. We've got our group of people here in the studio, and then you do it from Winnipeg. And I thought, oh, fine, what the hell? I'd had some great conversations with these people beforehand, so I kind of knew of them. Never been on the radio. It was more casual conversations that I had with them. And so then when we were on, it was just really funny. I was trying to, make an impression and get some zingers in there. And people really enjoyed my appearances. And so what happened then, a couple weeks later, I was asked to fill in for a 2-hour music show. And I said, that's not my thing. I don't really... No. The music's already picked out. You just have to come on and say, hey, that was Celine Dion. Hey, that was Madonna. Hey, that was whatever. And then fill a minute and a half, tell a story, do something silly, entertaining, just be you even. And I said, that's not my... I want to be a journalist. I want to be a reporter for the Winnipeg Free Press. I went to school across the street from the big newspaper in my hometown. I saw it every day. I loved writing. That's what I want to do. And so I was kind of against it, but at the same time kind of intrigued, and I was like, okay. So then I did it, and same kind of a thing. I went into chat rooms and I was like, hey, listen to this radio show. Have you guys tuned into internet radio? Like, this is such a new concept. It's kind of interesting. And sure enough, I was able to drive traffic. Now, I didn't tell the guys at the radio station this, and so they were looking at this going, our streaming numbers, like, there's a lot of people, like, where is this audience coming from? Well, it was old JB here, the self-marketer. And so that's what happened. And then all of a sudden I was like, hey, you know what? They asked me if I wanted to host my own show, and I said, okay, fine, I will do it the second week and then the week after. And same sort of a deal, just like the newspaper column. I could cash in, I can do the work one time, cash on it a bunch of different ways. So that's what's called syndication, right? And so I ended up doing that. I had a couple of episodes of the show, and then internet radio stations were popping up everywhere. And I went and emailed a bunch of them. I'm like, here's this demo. Here's a 2-hour show. You're looking for content? Great. It's a prepackaged show. You don't even have to do anything. Here you are. And people wanted to broadcast my show. And then by the end of that year, I had 20 some radio stations that were running me, and I literally had a grid on the wall in my parents' basement. Like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay, 2 o'clock on Tuesday, I'm on this station. 4 o'clock on Wednesday, I'm on this station. I had it totally mapped out. And there was at one point, believe it or not, I think it was every 4 or 5 hours I was on the radio somewhere in the world. And so that was just a really cool thing. Now, of course, with podcasting and everybody having a platform, that doesn't seem like such a big feat now. But back then, 15, 16, 17 years ago, that was significant, right? You had no social media, so you didn't have an instant audience as you would now with your friends and family and whoever. You really had to slug it out and you had to struggle. So I started doing the show, and then I was kind of like, well, this is sort of boring at this point. Like, I'll start telling stories about celebrities, and then I'll just kind of, do like a David Letterman who was on the air at the time. I'll do like David Letterman monologues and tell a story about, whoever's in the news. Ozzy Osbourne did this, and then you have a punchline, kind of a joke. So I started to do that, and then over the course of time, it was like, why don't I start interviewing celebrities? Like, why don't I just see who I can get to come on this show? And at the time, it really wasn't anybody mainstream. It really wasn't anybody, especially Americans, because I was a Canadian, on American stations, but they didn't know, the American audiences didn't know these Canadian quote-unquote celebrities that I was getting. But by Canadian standards, these were names, these were household names. And so it took a while to kind of get established, and then Fox gave me the opportunity to interview, I think, Johnny Sanchez for Mad TV. That was my very first kind of mainstream entertainment celebrity interview with an American network. And I remember being so grateful for the opportunity. And that publicist who arranged it, by the way, still, now, we still do celebrity interviews on this, is still one of my contacts. He's at a different network now, all these years later. And I've said that to him. I was like, I remind him every once in a while that I'm really appreciative. And the rest is history. So over the course of that 15 years that I was hosting Top of the Charts, again, like I said, you heard all of the celebrity interviews on this podcast, and you actually heard more of the interview, because for radio, we were always strapped for time. We would have an 8-minute segment, and of course it would run 14, 15, 17 minutes, and we couldn't play the entire thing on the radio. And that was one of the reasons the podcast was created, so that it's like, it was cut for time, but here, you can listen to the whole thing on the podcast. And we didn't have to censor it, we didn't have to do it. I mean, not that anything bad really ever happened. No, there might have been the odd swear, but but again, it's still something you can't do on the radio. And when I think about just what we did over those 15 years, I mean, the travel tourism programming alone was ridiculous. Going to Panama, how many times in Mexico, Yukon, we went to China. We did a show in China. By the way, fun fact, we actually taped 3 different travel tourism programs from destinations that never aired. China, we taped, I think it was 2017, and it was, oh my God, it was such an awful trip. It was an Air Canada press trip. I wasn't even supposed to be invited on it, but they invited me by accident. So when they invited me, I had emailed a bunch of the radio stations, and I said, is this cool to do? Like, China and the US, it's just not that great at the time. Are you guys okay with that? And so they were like, you know what, you're going to make it entertaining. It's going to be something fun, whatever. It's not going to be controversial. And so I ended up going. And we're getting some weird sort of static and stuff on the microphone? Okay. I was moving, and all of a sudden I see the lines jump on the screen. And so I ended up going to China. It was the most horrendous trip ever. Not only did I miss my flight, for no fault of my own, there was a maintenance or a malfunction, mechanical problem with the plane in Toronto. So we were late, and then we missed connections, and then, it's just it's a domino effect at that point, right? And so it was like the Amazing Race. I'm in this airport. I don't even know where we landed. Was it Beijing? Oof, I'm going to have to look that up. But this massive airport, nobody speaks English, and then you'll go to the 3rd floor, go here, go there. And it was, I believe, a Sunday night, so it's like a ghost town, which you wouldn't think that it would be in a big city, in China. And I was just like, I don't even know where to go. I swear to you, if you've watched The Amazing Race, it was very similar, where you're just like, do I go here? Do I go here? Who can help me? Hey, do you know English? Do you speak English? What can we do? And I just thought, I haven't even been gone for 24 hours. Like, the flight there was crazy, right? 12, 13 hours, whatever it was. And the fact that I'm there, I was by myself. None of the team was allowed to come with me, which was because I wasn't even supposed to go, but then we've kind of forced them to do it. And Air Canada, my bags, didn't get on. They didn't know if they got onto the connecting flight that I should have been on. So they didn't know. It was sweltering. It was in September. It was sweltering there. And I'm in the airport. I'm just like, I have my carry-on bag, and that's about it. The tourism people, I didn't know if they were still at the airport. My phone didn't work there, so I didn't have any, connection. I couldn't. And it wasn't, I was just like, I've got to get somewhere. I'm not sleeping. And you'd think there'd be a hotel connected to that airport. There was not. And so finally, there happened to be an American tourist who was from China. He was Chinese. And I said, can you help? Like, I'm not even asking for money. I just need you to help me either translate or just whatever. I said, I'm here from Canada. I'm on this press trip. I missed the connection. No fault of my own. I just need to get to a hotel. I've got money. That's not an issue. I can pay whatever. I just need you to help me get there. And he's like, well, I'm going to a hotel right now with my mom. We just landed. We just got here. So, why don't you take the hotel shuttle and then just stay at that hotel? I said, great. Well, the shuttle driver goes and says, this isn't a taxi. Do you have a reservation? If you don't have a reservation, I'm not taking you there. And I said, no, I'm going to be staying there. So this nice guy, now you have to remember, there was nothing open in the airport. I couldn't get money. I couldn't do anything. And he's like, you know what? Don't. I'll give him money for you. And I was like, thank you so much. Like this, when these people have these breakdowns on Amazing Race, I felt it. I totally could have just had this meltdown, and cried there and just said, take me home. I want to go home. It was really that bad on the first day. And so then I get to the hotel, I plug in my computer and everything, and I get it fired up. And then there's all these emails from the tourism people. Oh, well, you missed your flight. We've rebooked you on this one. And I thought, I was just running around the airport trying to get rebooked, and you guys ended up doing it for me. Now, keeping in mind, they were from Air Canada, so it's kind of their job to do that. But I had no contact. I didn't know. And so then they said, your flight's in the next morning, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, okay. I paid for the hotel, which ended up being like $300 and some. And then they said they weren't going to reimburse me. And I thought, that's the last. You're not going to fuck over a reporter on a press trip. Let's be honest here. Because that reporter now has this massive platform to go and say, here's that Air Canada press trip I was on. Air Canada, Air Canada, Air Canada, Air Canada, China. I can name drop you guys into the grave at that point, right? They eventually did, don't worry. But yeah, it was ridiculous. So for 3 days, I was wearing soaking wet clothing because we were going to a different town, a different city every day. So there was really no way that my bags could have caught up with us because we were zigzagging all over the place. And finally, this guy comes up on this little bike in the middle of the night. And then, of course, he wants money. And I was just like, why am I having to pay to get my luggage back? There's a problem here. You guys, why do I have to give this guy cash? So I ended up taping, believe it or not, I taped one segment with somebody who was with the Canadian delegation, when it was an international tourism festival. I ended up interviewing one of the people that was on the trip with me. And even in that moment, I was just like, yeah, I'm not even airing anything. I'm not doing this. I'm just not. It wasn't great. Our tour guide didn't even really know where he was going or where we were going. He was looking up Wikipedia pages and just kind of narrating things as he was going along. It was very bizarre. And there was one woman from Saskatchewan. She was not a tour operator. She was a travel agent. And so she was there to kind of get ideas so that if people wanted to go to China, she could recommend, go here, go do this, whatever. And she became sort of my best bud during the trip. And she was like, I've never been on something like this before. Like, this is just a shit show. And I said to her, you know what? Same thing. I'm supposed to be... day 1 or 2, I emailed back to the office and I said, this isn't happening, you guys. I know that we had planned to have 2 weeks of programming. Scrap it, drop in something that we'd pre-taped or whatever. Like, this is not happening. I'm not doing it. And it's one of those trips that, I was there for a week, never saw the light of day. I eventually teased a couple pictures and posted them, on Facebook or whatever, but never did we never did air anything because there was nothing taped. I refused to do it. I was like, I'll go through the motions. I'll go along with the trip and everything, but that's about it. I'm not doing. And then the other two, I said there was 3 destinations. The other 2 was Fort Lauderdale that we had taped 2 years ago in February, right before the Corona shutdowns happened. We were doing spring break vacations in Fort Lauderdale. They were supposed to air that April. Of course, the world shut down. So we did these, we did some boat cruises. I did some axe throwing. I had some beers and then went throwing axes. We did a whole bunch of things, never aired. And then we taped something in West Hollywood the fall before, for the following summer, and I had lunch with the mayor. We actually did a bunch of cool things. I went to a spa. There was like this whole light and mirror exhibit in a mall, And that was another one that the tourism board was like, we're not bringing people here this summer. We don't want people coming to West Hollywood, so don't even bother. And so we scrapped those. And then when I signed off from the radio shows last June in Nashville, we had a few different shows that were pre-taped and just never aired. So there you go. So free vacations for me. Coming up in the next segment, I know we've got to take a break. I've just blown through this. But coming up in the next segment, you're going to hear me telling sort of more stories like this. I was asked to answer a couple questions and sort of reminisce and reflect on my time on the air. This was taped, I think it was December. So it's going to sort of just kind of pick up like mid-conversation in a way. But I've got some clips from the radio show, me talking about some of the memories of covering, red carpets and celebrities and some of these travel programs as well. So you're going to hear that coming up in the next segment right after this break on The Scribble.
It's never too early to start thinking about your next holiday. Have you checked out Mexico recently? From tequila tasting, swimming with horses, to ziplining through the jungle and watching whales and dolphins in their natural habitat, Puerto Vallarta has it all. Visit mexico.jbonair.com to see all the fun PV has to offer. That's at mexico.jbonair.com for hundreds of photos, interviews, and videos from around the tourist hotspot. Check out mexico.jbonair.com for all the fun. That's mexico.jbonair.com.
Isn't it crazy that you wait for payday, but before you know it, you're strapped for cash again? It's time to stop blowing your money and become a smart spender with the book, The Official Guide to Being an American Cheapskate at cheapskatebook.com. Learn simple ways to cut costs at home every day and during special times of the year. Don't go broke at Christmas. Don't remortgage the house for a fancy vacation. The book is filled with tips to save you money throughout the year. Check out the best-selling book, The Official Guide to Being an American Cheapskate at cheapskatebook.com or on Amazon and iTunes.
Ever had something to get off your chest but never had the balls to say it? That's a load of crap. Speak Free with JB.com is exactly what you've been waiting for. Your chance to tell it like it is and not care what anybody else thinks. Have your say on issues of the day. Join newspaper and radio columnist Jeremy Bradley as he tells it like it is. Hundreds of thousands of people have stopped by, including some well-known celebrities who have had a chat with JB and speak candidly about what's really going on in the world. You can join them too. Have a rant or a rave. Be brave and head on over to www.speakfreewithjb.com now.
Oh, there's nothing like live radio, though. That's the thing. For the 15 years that I was hosting Top of the Charts, there were times when I was live when we first started on, Monday nights when my show started. But, I was voice tracked most of the time. So even though I was saying that we were live, we weren't live. And that's just one of the things in broadcasting. But certainly when you're on a red carpet, right, when you're doing something from Los Angeles, there's no faking that because if you're, you are live. And so, actually, no, you're not. Do I have a spoiler here about the entertainment business? The red carpet broadcasts that you're seeing typically aren't, and for the most part, they're not always live. They could actually be off by, 5, 10, 15 minutes. And here's how you, if you actually sort of think about the logistics of it all, okay? So let's say the red carpet broadcast happens from, 5 to 7 or 6 to 8, whatever time zone you're in, okay? The red carpet broadcast ends at 7 o'clock. And then the award show starts at 7. Think about this, though. If you have the big stars that are arriving fashionably late, right, and you see them being interviewed at 6:55 or 6:57, but the award show starts at 7. Think about that. Is Meryl Streep really going to be booking it through that theater and being rushed to her seat or whatever? It doesn't happen that way, right? So the telecasts where it shows the red carpet pretty much emptied out and no big stars for the last 5-10 minutes, that's probably a actual live broadcast, but it could be just tape delay for some of them. If you're not having the big stars because they've got to be front and center for the monologue, right? You're going to have the close-ups of them when whoever is hosting comes out and starts making jokes. So that's one way that okay. So anyway, enough about that. But yeah, with our radio broadcast, doing live red carpets from America's Got Talent or The Voice, there were times when we were live and then there were other times we weren't. And I think that some of the more interesting moments, the one that I can think of would be, it was America's Got Talent. The red carpet was happening during the show, which was a little bit weird because normally you think of the red carpet before a broadcast. Sometimes it'll happen after a broadcast because then they'll parade the winner out, the winner of the show, the reality show, whatever it is. And with America's Got Talent, I'm trying to think of the one time where it was just ridiculous. It was so wild. We had We had Patti LaBelle, we had Stevie Wonder, we had Leanne Rimes, and I was just finished talking to somebody. I don't even remember who it was. The carpet was going from left to right. So you basically had a clear view of whoever was coming next. Oftentimes the publicist is kind of saying, did you want a few minutes with Patty? Okay, you're next. Yeah, just, keep it 3 minutes and then you're good to go. And I'm sitting here going, I got a live show happening anyway, so I have about 1:47, then it's good. You do have some leeway with a live broadcast, though. That's one of those things where, yes, it's a music show. We have that commitment to playing the music, but at the same time, I mean, you got Patti LaBelle, you got Stevie Wonder. If you can get 3.5 minutes with them, well, you know what? Dump the songs then. Dump a song, dump half a song, dump whatever. And we program the show so it's fixed. It's okay. Like we there is a buffer. There is leeway. There's time in there. And so we had I can't even remember who it was, but I was talking with somebody, again, working left to right. And it's so distracting because you have in your ear somebody counting you down. We got 15 seconds, wrap up. You still need that, 5-10 seconds to thank them. It's great to chat with you. Thanks for joining us. Great. One more shout out for your website, blah, blah, blah. And then you're hearing this. We got 5, 4, out, 3, 2. And then the live show cuts out and you go back to the music. And in this moment, I'm hearing a countdown to whoever I'm talking with. I got the 45. I got the 30. I got the 15. Then I hear a different voice. I got voices in my head. Then I hear a different voice going, Cobra Starship coming around on your right, going 5, 4. And I'm sitting there going, holy shit, wait, what's going on here? Are we going back to the music or am I staying on the live red carpet? Cobra Starship is here? How did I not even know this? You get the press package of, who's on the show, who's performing, what the surprise guests are. Sometimes you even know who wins before it's announced. And I don't know if Cobra was just a surprise guest or whatever it was. And remember, like I said, this was all happening during the broadcast. So we didn't even see them performing. I didn't know that they were there. And all of a sudden, think about this. You've got this group of people now. You know their name. You know their hit song at the time. I can't even think of what it is now at this point. And you're live, so it's like, holy crap, I don't know these people's names. What was the name of their song? Now, again, if you've got a good team, they're feeding you the information as this is all playing out. But at the same time, it's very difficult when you've got all this noise, you've got the people talking to you, you're trying to hear what's happening in your head, in your ear, and so you just kind of, run with it. The trick that I always used, this is something that only really insiders of our show knew, was that if I didn't know who the person was, or if I didn't know what their name was, or the name of the group or whatever, in that moment, on the spot, or if I forgot like 5 seconds before, my default was, oh my God, we're on the red carpet having such a great time. I'm now here with a legend in the music business. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell everybody who I'm talking with. That was sort of my go-to, and I believe I did that with the Cobra Starship interview, just to buy some time, because everybody can introduce themselves, and then I've got to gather myself and regroup. I always like people introducing themselves on the radio. That's what we're doing here for Syndicated Radio, Top of the Charts Entertainment Wrap-Up. Who are you guys?
We are Cobra Starship. What is up?
How's it going tonight?
Awesome. We are very excited to be here this evening.
So what did you...
You don't sound excited. You just got off stage.
I'm tired.
You're just in shock.
I'm decompressing. That's why I haven't accepted it.
He just played in front of 20 million people. How do you feel? What are you going to do now?
I'm going to Disneyland!
Yeah!
The energy's pretty crazy in there, isn't it?
Yeah, unbelievable.
Awesome. So unreal.
But that's one of the interesting things, where you're about to head back into the music, and all of a sudden they tell you, no, stick with the live show, stick with your interview, go talk with them, go another minute 17, go another minute 24, and truthfully, you are not standing there looking at the clock. You are waiting for someone to cue you, tell you to wrap it up, and that's always the fun thing. We had another moment where we were live. It was in Jasper, Alberta, when I was there, and we were doing a skiing segment. We were there for Pride, covering it, and again, we were playing it off as live because it sort of had to be, but it was on a tape delay because it was Pride weekend, so you can't really go and say, oh, we're reporting live from Pride, and then it airs 4 weeks later. And so we had taped things, and then they were airing a couple of hours later, so we weren't exactly, but we were still on the same day. And we're on the ski hill, and now I also had no interest in going downhill skiing. I tried it one time in junior high. I was scared shitless. I just didn't even want to do it. And so they said, here's what we'll do, is we will snowmobile you up to the top of the hill, the mountain, to do the photos that we need to do. We have an obligation to get pictures of you on this mountain. So whether you do it or not, either you go up the ski lift and then we snowmobile you down, or we snowmobile you up and then we snowmobile you down. We got to get shots of you up there with this mascot that was there. And I was like, okay, fine. So here I go. We go zipping up the hill, and I'm with the avalanche guy, because we were doing an interview as well. And then we end up coming down, and we're doing this interview now with the avalanche guy and the dog. You know, what this dog does is, you know, he sniffs out people or he listens for things or whatever. And in the moment in the segment, which was only about like a minute and a half, all of a sudden this kid comes flying down the hill and crashes into like that orange netting that they kind of have at the bottom of the hill. And I have to, in a brief moment, see, again, because you're not visually seeing what's happening, you kind of hear a crash. You hear just sort of like a rustle or kind of a thump, and then you hear me kind of do a half laugh because I just watched this kid like come flying into this net, and it was really, really funny. But again, we're in that moment where you've got to fake compassion, right? You've got to almost go and say like, "Are you okay?" But this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. So I felt like a dick in the moment, but the kid was okay. You know, that's why that netting was there, right? It stopped him, but he crashed into it. I'm holding this avalanche dog. The dog jumps out of my hand, you know, jumps down because, you know, he got scared. And you hear the avalanche guy in the segment go, "Oh, are you okay?" And then I kind of just stumble through it and I just wrap up the segment. We've got pictures of me with Bandit. And, you know, Bandit was actually my dog saying, "Oh, no, we just got... Careful, we just got... went into by a young skier. Do you need some hand up or no?" All right, we're going to get back to the music here. Live radio, everybody. We're going to get back to the music here, live from Jasper. And then there's one more moment where it was the... It was the Voice finale, and the winner had come out there, and I've told this story on the show a few times, where he's standing there with this woman, and for some reason I had it in my head that the woman was not who she was. And I say to him, you know, "You're standing up there, they're about to reveal the winner. What's going through your mind? You know, the picture, the screen is on you, and then the camera's on the judges, and then the audience, and then your mom." And I motioned to the woman, and then she said, "Well, I'm actually his wife." And I was just like, oh boy. Before the winner was read, you're standing on stage. We see Mom, we see you. We see Mom. We see...
his mom was there. I'm his wife.
Oh, sorry, wife. Let me talk about then what was going through your minds. I mean, that was, you know, ridiculous. The stress that must be going through your mind at that time, right?
Oh, I was just hoping for my state of West Virginia that I was going to pull it off, that I was going to win.
This time, though, we were not live, I think, to everybody. So that was something that right after that segment, I went and turned to my segment producer that was there, and I said, we cut that for the next run of this show, for the morning show that we do, like the entertainment wrap-up kind of a thing that I do, and we have clips of, you know, my interview with the winner and stuff like that. That is cut immediately. Before we even leave this red carpet, that part is scrapped, and it is nowhere to be heard ever again. Before the winner was read, you're standing on stage.
Oh, I was just hoping.
So that's it was an inadvertent slam, I guess, or an inadvertent insult. But, you know, you just sort of go with it. And I mean, that's far less embarrassing than other people have had on red carpet broadcasts. And like I said, the great thing about radio is that you can't see me. You couldn't see my face getting red. You couldn't see me sweating at that point and trying to get through this as quickly as possible. So...
We hear you chirping. Get scribbling. Tweet up the Scribble at The Scribble Show. Join the discussion with Jeremy Bradley. It's all going down right now on Twitter at The Scribble Show and at thescribbleshow.com.
Jeremy Bradley here, back on The Scribble. You know, I've been talking about the radio show this entire episode, and that's something that I don't miss at all, is having the 2-hour show. We've got commercials we've got to stick in. We've got to have a celebrity guest. We've got to have the music. We've got to cut a song. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. And all the while you're watching the clock, just as you heard in that sort of that sit-down kind of interview that I did, the audio version of it. And with this podcast, generally we do 30 minutes almost exactly every week. And that was actually sort of done as a kind of my way to keep myself on track and be like, hey, you know what, JB, you got to shut up. We got to keep it to 30 minutes. I've got some very long stories that I tell. At least with that, it gives me that guideline, right? You can't, okay, we've got other stuff to talk about, JB, you got to move on. And so this week I said to them, just when it was running long, I was like, you know what, just let me have this moment. This is, because here's why. And I said this during our New Year's Eve, you know, I was talking about New Year's resolutions and the year. We look back at the year and say, that was a shit show of a year. Thank God it's over. I'm looking forward. And I've always said, look back at the year that you had and celebrate your accomplishments. And that's something that I like doing. I have always celebrated my achievements and what I've done. So I mentioned earlier that Speak Free with JB website. I started that in my parents' basement. Every year, I'm not kidding you, I would put up some streamers and balloons, I even had like a little happy birthday sign. I would decorate my little area there in the basement on my desk. I would have a little bit of a celebration. And so every year, whether it was the anniversary of Top of the Charts, whether it was the Speak Free website, whatever it was, if it was the anniversary of something or the start of something, or, my book was put out this week. And so I've always celebrated and believe it or not, and this is where people make fun of me, sometimes it would just be me staging a photo and making it look like I'm having a party. Or it would be the dogs dressed up. Or I would have a cake made for myself. But I'm still celebrating what I've done. Because yes, you can have a spouse, you can have family, you can have friends that are supportive. You're the only one that truly appreciates what you do. And I fully believe that. Yes, they can be happy for you. Yes, your parents can be, my kid is so great, he's done this. And my husband is just, he's so proud of me. I am the only one that it means the most to me because I've done it. It's my work, it's my labor, it's my sweat, it's my tears, it's my money, it's my whatever. I did it. And so I've always celebrated what I've done. So that's why I just want to take a couple moments here to tell you, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're, an author, if you're whatever, stick with it. Very quick story before we go. They're already wrapping me. We're late. It's a podcast. I don't have to go to fuck another show. When I was putting out one of my first books, The Official Guide to Being a Winnipeg Cheapskate, you needed, the traditional way of getting a book in a store would be you write something, you pitch it to literary agents. They have this snotty attitude of, we'll get back to you. We receive a lot of submissions. If you're good enough for us, then we'll contact you. And that was just so discouraging to me. And so I thought, you know what, screw that. I'm not. And at the end of the day, you, the author, is making the least amount of money in the deal. Walmart's making their cut, the publisher is making their cut, your agent is making their cut, and you're getting, 60 cents a book for everything that you did. You're making the least amount of money. So I said, screw that. I wrote The Official Guide to Being a Winnipeg Cheapskate. I did the media blitz in my city. I was on every morning show. I was on the TV morning shows, the radio shows. I was in every newspaper. I had the city buzzing about this book. This is about 10 years ago now. And then people were going into Walmart. They were going into Costco looking for this book. So I took all these press clippings and I commented to the book buyers at Costco, Walmart, what have you. And I said, everybody's wanting this book. People are coming into your stores looking for it. You need to buy this book. You need to carry it. You need to have it in your store. And I was getting purchase orders and I was having book signings. We were selling out. And that was how that book became a bestseller. So that's where I go and say, you know what? If I'm going to have a cake made, it's the cover of my book and it's the cake is the shape of a book. And it's, and it says congratulations, JB or whatever it is. And I ordered it myself and I paid for it. But you know what? It's that moment in time where I go and say, that was pretty fucking awesome. And I did that. Because I could. Because I didn't give up. I didn't let anybody go and say, well, you need an agent. No, and then I'm a persistent dick, and I'm going to keep contacting you until you carry my book. And so you know what? You might as well. And that book was another thing that changed my life. It helped basically pay off a house. I mean, it led to just so many other things. I'm still known as Winnipeg Cheapskate. I still do local radio and TV. The local stations reach out to me. Hey, can we do a Cheapskate segment with you? Sure, great. So all these years later, right? Anyway, now I do have to go. Send me an email, live@jbonair.com, live@jbonair.com. Thank you so much for listening. I will talk to you same time, same place next week. Bye-bye for now.
Want more Scribble? Check out thescribbleshow.com for past shows, celebrity interviews, cheapskate tips, and more. That's at thescribbleshow.com and on Twitter at The Scribble Show. The Scribble is a Speak Free media presentation.
If you want some real